I was 38 years old when the world I had built with my husband crumbled beneath me. On the outside, we looked like the perfect couple: 15 years of marriage, a comfortable home, 2 cars in the driveway, vacations that looked beautiful on social media. People envied us, whispered about how lucky I was to have a man like Daniel. And for a long time, I believed them. I believed in him. But perfection is a costume, and beneath it, our marriage had already begun to rot. The late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings. The subtle withdrawal of affection, no more kisses on my forehead, no more reaching for my hand in the dark. At first, I told myself it was stress, that his job was demanding, that we were simply in a season of distance. But deep down, a voice I tried to silence kept telling me something was wrong. I ignored it until I couldn't. One evening while Daniel was in the shower, I heard his phone buzz on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but something in me knew the truth was hiding there. One message preview was all it took. "I'm late. We need to talk." My heart stopped. It wasn't from a client or colleague, it was from her Melissa. Melissa wasn't a stranger. She was a younger woman from his company, someone I had met at a Christmas party years earlier. She had smiled too brightly at him that night, laughed too eagerly at his jokes. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure. But as I scrolled through their thread, the illusion of paranoia shattered. Their affair wasn't just real, it was deep, and now she was pregnant. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned me. Pregnant. She had stolen my husband, and now she was carrying his child. A wave of nausea and rage rolled through me so violently that I had to sit down just to breathe. All those years of love, of sacrifices, of building a life together, and he had thrown it all away for her. For someone new, someone exciting, someone who could give him what he thought I no longer could. When Daniel came out of the shower, towel around his waist, he looked at me with the same calm indifference he'd shown for months. I wanted to scream at him, to throw the phone at his face, but I didn't. I swallowed my pain. Because in that moment, I realized the betrayal was bigger than a single argument. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. The days that followed were a blur of silence and numbness. He confessed soon enough, of course. He said Melissa was pregnant, that he had to do the right thing. The words stung like acid. Do the right thing. As if abandoning me after 15 years, as if humiliating me in front of our entire community was some noble act of honor. My friends tried to comfort me, but nothing they said could touch the gaping wound inside me. It wasn't just that he cheated. It wasn't even that she was pregnant. It was the fact that everyone knew, or would know soon enough. The whispers, the pitying looks, the quiet judgment. I would forever be the woman who wasn't enough to keep her husband. The divorce proceedings began quickly. Daniel was eager to move on, to start his new life. Melissa, glowing and smug, never missed an opportunity to flaunt her growing belly, as if every curve was proof of her victory over me. She had won, and I was expected to fade quietly into the background. But I wasn't done. Because one night, while drowning my sorrows in wine and old memories, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mark. He had been Daniel's best friend once, though they'd drifted apart. His voice was heavy, hesitant, but when he spoke, the words froze my blood. "Melissa's baby," he said, his tone breaking. "It might not be Daniel's." The silence that followed was unbearable. My heart hammered so loudly I thought he could hear it through the phone. He explained, stumbling over the details, that he and Melissa had been together before she latched onto Daniel, that the timing didn't line up as neatly as she claimed, that she might be carrying his child instead. I hung up the phone, shaking, my mind spinning. If what Mark said was true, then the entire story Daniel and Melissa had built was a lie. The smugness, the righteousness, the way she had paraded her pregnancy like a trophy, all of it rested on a foundation that could collapse with a single truth. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt power, and I knew exactly when I would use it. Daniel and Melissa were planning a celebration dinner after the divorce was finalized, a sickening little party to announce their new chapter to friends and family. It was meant to be my funeral, the burial of my dignity. But instead, it would be theirs. Because I wasn't going to sit quietly in the ashes of what they destroyed. I was going to rise from them, and I was going to bring the truth with me. The day of the divorce hearing arrived like a storm cloud I had been watching roll in for months. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded neatly in my lap, while Daniel avoided my eyes, and Melissa sat smugly a few rows back, her hand protectively stroking her rounded belly. She wanted me to see her triumph, to burn the image of her carrying his so-called future into my mind. For a moment, I almost let it destroy me. But then I remembered Mark's voice on the phone trembling as he admitted the baby might be his. That memory was my anchor. The judge's words were perfunctory, the legal language sterile. Property divided, papers signed, marriage dissolved. 15 years of my life reduced to signatures on a page. Daniel stood as though a weight had been lifted. Melissa smiling faintly as if the gavel had blessed their union. To them, this was freedom. To me, it was an execution. But little did they know I had already sharpened my blade. That evening, their divorce celebration took place at one of the fanciest restaurants in town. They had invited friends, colleagues, even some of Daniel's family, who had shamefully chosen to support him. It was disgusting, parading betrayal as if it were a milestone worth honoring. I wasn't invited, of course. Why would I be? In their minds, I had been discarded, forgotten. But I wasn't forgotten. I walked into that restaurant unannounced, my heels clicking against the polished floor, my head held higher than it had been in months. Conversations stilled, forks paused mid-air, every eye turned toward me, and I could feel the ripple of whispers. Daniel's face drained of color, Melissa's smug smile faltered, her hand tightening around her wine glass, as though it might shield her. "Well," I said softly, letting my voice carry, "isn't this cozy?" The table was silent. Daniel tried to stand his words, tumbling. "Victoria, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," I interrupted, my voice cutting clean through the room. "After all, we're celebrating, aren't we? A divorce finalized, a new baby on the way, a happy couple stepping boldly into their future." My eyes shifted to Melissa, watching her squirm. "Except, there's one little problem with this fairy tale." Melissa's cheeks flushed crimson. She stammered, "You don't know what you're talking about." But I did. I knew enough. And I had brought more than words. Slowly, deliberately, I placed a small envelope on the white tablecloth. Inside were copies of messages between Melissa and Mark, messages she had deleted, but that Mark had saved, late-night exchanges, promises, whispered in the dark timelines that overlapped in a way that made the truth undeniable. Daniel's hand shook as he reached for the papers. His eyes scanned the pages, his lips moving soundlessly. The color drained from his face, replaced by something raw, something he couldn't mask even if he tried. The room was silent, except for the sound of Melissa's labored breathing. "She's lying," she hissed, her voice high, desperate. "It doesn't mean anything." "It means," I said calmly, "that the baby you've been parading as proof of your victory might not even belong to him. That this entire celebration rests on a lie." Gasps echoed around the table. Someone dropped their fork. A woman at the far end whispered to her husband, eyes wide, and suddenly the entire restaurant seemed to lean in, captivated by the unraveling of their perfect facade. Daniel looked up at Melissa, betrayal written across every line of his face. For the first time, he wasn't the betrayer, he was the betrayed. And the irony of that moment nearly broke me into laughter. I leaned forward, my voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You stole my husband, Melissa. You carried your belly like a crown. You wanted the world to see me broken, humiliated. But tell me, how does it feel to sit in my seat now? How does it feel to wonder if the man you built your fantasy with is even the father of your child?" Melissa's eyes brimmed with tears. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat, tangled in shame. Daniel pushed back from the table, his chair screeching against the floor as he stormed out, leaving her behind. The guests whispered louder now, their judgment cutting sharper than any blade. I stood tall, gathering the envelope back into my hands. "Enjoy your celebration," I said softly. "After all, you worked so hard for it." And with that, I turned and walked out. My heart pounding not with grief, but with something far more powerful, vindication. For the first time since the day I discovered the affair, I felt like I wasn't drowning, I was rising. ChatGPT said, "The night air outside the restaurant hit me like a baptism, cool, sharp, and cleansing. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of betrayal crushing my chest." I stood there for a moment listening to the muffled chaos erupting inside and felt the strangest sense of calm. I hadn't just survived the humiliation they'd tried to force on me, I had flipped it back onto them. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the quiet of my living room. The silence was different now. It wasn't heavy with grief, it was filled with possibility. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages, some from friends who had witnessed the scene, others from those who had heard the gossip already spreading like wildfire. Some were shocked, some offered sympathy, and others sent admiration masked as curiosity. I ignored most of them. I didn't need validation. For once, I knew my worth without anyone else telling me. The next day, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked like a ghost of the man I once loved. Disheveled, broken, his eyes bloodshot from either rage or sleeplessness. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I leaned against the doorway, blocking him. "Funny, isn't it? That's exactly what I said the night you came home late, and you told me I was imagining things." His jaw tightened. "Victoria, please, I didn't know. She told me it was mine, she swore. And you believed her." I cut in coldly. "Because it was easier than facing what you were really doing. Because you wanted an excuse to leave me." He flinched, his shoulders sagging. "I made a mistake." I almost laughed. "A mistake." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, missing a phone call, leaving the milk out overnight." What he did wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. Over and over, day after day, he chose her. And now, standing on my porch, he looked at me like maybe he wanted me to save him. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "You need to leave," I told him quietly. "Whatever happens with Melissa, it's not my burden to carry. Not anymore." He hesitated, searching my face for softness, for the woman who once forgave him for being late, for being absent, for being human. But she was gone. Finally, he turned and walked away, his figure shrinking as he moved down the path until he was just another shadow swallowed by the night. In the weeks that followed, the scandal exploded. Melissa's pregnancy became the centerpiece of town gossip. The whispers that once pitied me now pitied him. DNA tests were demanded, rumors spread, and the smugness that had once defined her was replaced with shame. She rarely left her house, and when she did, her head was bowed low. Daniel, once so sure of his control, now lived under the weight of humiliation. And me, I began to heal. Slowly, painfully, but with determination. I redecorated the house, painted the walls, replaced the bed. I filled the silence with music again, learned to cook for one without feeling lonely, and even started to laugh with friends without the sound cracking inside me. Every day I rebuilt myself from the ruins he left behind. But the greatest change was within me. I realized that love doesn't define my worth, and betrayal doesn't destroy it. Daniel and Melissa tried to write me out of my own story, but I had taken the pen back. Months later, I was invited to a wedding. It was uncomfortable at first, standing in a room where people once looked at me with pity. But as I danced under the soft glow of string lights, I felt truly free for the first time. Someone asked me quietly, "How did you do it? How did you survive all that?" I smiled, not bitterly, but with a peace that came from hard-earned scars. "I didn't survive it," I said softly. "I rebuilt from it." The final confrontation came not with shouting or revenge, but with silence and distance. Months after the scandal, I saw Daniel once more at the grocery store. He looked thinner, older, weighed down by consequences he had chosen. Melissa wasn't with him. I heard later that the DNA test confirmed what Mark had already told me, that the baby wasn't his. Their fantasy had crumbled into ashes, leaving them both with nothing but shame. He caught my eye as I stood in the produce aisle, and for a moment I saw the flicker of recognition, the desperate hope that maybe time had softened me. But I simply nodded politely, turned back to my basket, and walked away. That was the most powerful revenge of all. Not anger, not bitterness, but indifference. He was no longer the center of my story. I learned something through all of this. Betrayal doesn't just wound you, it strips you down, forces you to face yourself in your rawest form. And in that painful reflection, I found a woman I had forgotten. A woman stronger than the lies told to her, stronger than the humiliation forced on her, stronger than the grief of losing the man she once loved. The divorce celebration that was meant to humiliate me had become the stage for truth. The night they toasted to their new life became the night their lies collapsed, and in that collapse I found my freedom. Life after Daniel wasn't easy, but it was mine. I discovered joy in the smallest things again. Morning walks in the park, dinners with friends, late night journaling under soft lamplight. I started traveling alone, something I had always been too afraid to do when I was married. I went to Italy and stood in front of cathedrals knowing no one could take the moment from me. I hiked mountains letting the wind remind me that solitude isn't emptiness, it's strength. Sometimes people still whisper. When they see me still bring up the scandal, still shake their heads at how public it all became. But I don't flinch anymore. Because I know the truth, what was meant to break me only revealed how unbreakable I really am. And maybe that's what I want you to take from my story. If you've been betrayed, if you've been left in the ashes of someone else's choices, know this. You are not defined by what they did. You are defined by how you rise. And rising doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your head held high, leaving them to choke on their own ruin. So if this story touched you, if you felt that same fire of betrayal, but also the strength of survival, I invite you to stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear they are stronger than the pain, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And please leave a comment, tell me your story. Because healing begins when we realize we are not alone in it.